everyone, it's Shannon here for Waffle Flower Crafts. Today we are going to build a simple holiday scene with the Fa La La combo to create this festive Christmas card. I'm going to start this project by stamping my images. This is the Fa La La combo, comes with the Fa La La stamp set and the matching dies in the back. Love the set because not only do you get those sheep, you also get two pairs of really cute caroling mice as well. I pulled off the sheep image and I'm going to stamp it here on a piece of Bristol paper. Bristol paper is nice and smooth and it's going to allow me to do my Tombow dual brush pen watercoloring very easily. The ink is just going to glide over the surface. I did stamp my images in VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a waterproof ink. So I'm going to start watercoloring these. I'm going to start with my marker direct to paper. I have a very light tan here and I'm just going to kind of outline the face, do a little bit on the ears, even kind of make a little mark near the nose, and then with a slightly damp brush I'll just kind of blend it out. I'm using very light colors here, so this goes really quickly. In fact, I didn't speed this up very much so you could really kind of see the process a little bit better. So I took kind of a cream color here and just colored the wool on this sheep, and now I'm just going to add a little bit of pink for the rosy cheeks and the nose, and then again with my damp brush just kind of blend it out, soften it just a bit. I'm also going to use that pink once more to kind of color in the ears, put a little bit at the base, and then with my damp brush just kind of blend everything back out a little bit more, kind of working on those cheeks just to soften them up a little bit. So now that I'm finished with that sheep, I'm going to move on to a second. Now I'm going to do this one a little bit differently so they're not all the exact same. So I picked out a gray for this one. Again, kind of went around the outline of the sheep and then blended it out. I basically start with the marker direct to paper wherever I want it to be the darkest. So those areas that would be kind of in shadow, though I'm not super worried about making this totally 100% realistic. So now that I kind of blended that out with the damp brush, I'm going back in and adding a little bit more of that gray to some areas that I missed, kind of like around the book, kind of adding a shadow there, and also a little bit on his ears. I kind of missed that part. So once again, after I had the ink, I then blend it out. I'm now going to grab my pink again and I'm going to do the ears and the nose, blend that out a little bit. And I am just about done with this sheep. I'm just going to finish him up by adding a little bit more gray to that bit of wool that's kind of like his bangs, just to give a little shadow there. So I went ahead off camera and finished the rest of my sheep, either coloring them in the gray or the cream. And I'm just going to finish up this last sheep here. I did take a darker gray and I'm coloring right now the hoofs of the sheep and blending a little bit on the sheep that has the Santa coat. He has the biggest hoof, so you need a little bit of blending. And then just finish by adding a little red for their tongues and a little bit of black inside the Santa sheep's mouth. And now I'm ready to move on to my red. So I'm going to color the hats and the scarves first, just the smallest areas. Again, I just use my marker direct to paper, then blend it out with the damp brush. Now moving on to my Santa suit here. I'm going around the outer edges here, very, very simple. And once I get that ink down, again, I'm going to take my damp brush and just kind of blend it out to create these gradations. I think the key here is, besides the Bristol paper, is just very little water. You don't need much water to get that ink to move and kind of glide over your surface. So now that I've finished his red portions of his suit, I'm just going to add a shadow here with this very light blue just to kind of create a little bit of depth here on these white sections. So I'm coloring all the trim on his Santa suit as well as all the caroling books with a little bit of that blue. Now I'm going to move on to a green. I'm going to do this kind of limey green on some of the hats and the scarves here. Just again, marker to paper and then blend it out. And then I have a darker green, kind of a Kelly green, that I'm going to finish up all of the areas on the scarves and hats that I didn't color previously. So again, just going to direct to paper and then blend it out. And last but not least, I have these little antlers, so a little bit of brown here, and just blend that out, and that will actually complete all my sheep. So I went ahead and stamped this street light that I didn't stamp earlier, and I'm going to color it now. I'm going to start with the kind of darker gray that I used earlier, just kind of outline the edges of the street light, and then I will move on to the same red that I used previously to color the ribbon, the bow, and the ribbon that's kind of wrapped around. I'm using a liner brush here because this this is a very small little area. Then I used a yellow and an orange for the actual flame, and then my blue to add a little glare on the glass. So now that I've gone ahead and die cut the sheep and the little street light out with the matching dies, and I'm going to put those aside. We're now going to move on to creating kind of our background. I have a tree from the Cozy Cabin die set. It's a really great die set for creating scenes. I'm just going to use the tree though this time because I want to create an outdoor scene. And I die cut it 3 times out of a white cardstock, and now I'm just going to ink blend. I ink blended the tops with mowed lawn, and then I'm going to ink blend the bottoms with pine needles. And this is just going to create a little gradation and just add a little bit more interest to these trees, a little bit of depth. Once I finish ink blending each one of the trees, I'm going to then move on to my background. For my background, I'm actually going to use a separate A2 panel here. So I have an A2 panel of 110 pound white cardstock, and I'm going to ink blend this with 3 Distress Oxides. I'm starting with tumbled glass here, and I apologize. This video is much shakier than normal. I was unable to stabilize this for some reason, so I apologize for it being so shaky this time. Once I finished with the tumbled glass, I then moved on to Salty Ocean, again kind of creating a gradation here, so getting a little bit darker as I work my way to the right. I'm going to finish up my trio of inks here with a blueprint sketch, and once I finish with that, I'm just going to go back through my inks, do a little bit more Salty Ocean, and then finish up here with a little bit more of that tumbled glass just to kind of smooth out that gradation. So now that I have my background done, I'm going to move on to stamping my sentiment. And I do want to point out here that my panel is completely dry. I did heat set the whole panel before I brought it and placed it in my MISTI here because I am going to do some heat embossing. So this sentiment is from the Fa La La stamp set, and you can see it's straight, but I'm going to curve it just by kind of twisting or bending the stamp and then sticking it back to the MISTI, and that's going to kind of hold it in place. And this is just going to create a nice little arch for the sentiment and just add a little bit more interest. I did temporarily have my images there just so I could figure out where I needed that sentiment to go, and because I am heat embossing, I did put down some anti-static powder, and then I'm going to ink up my sentiment in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Then I will pour on some like glittery black embossing powder. This is just going to add a little bit of sparkle and I think kind of make it feel even more Christmassy, and then I'll just heat set that with my heat tool, and that just again will add a little bit of glitter and sparkle to that sentiment. So now that I have my sentiment done, I am going to move on to adding a little bit more to this background. Again, I'm going to do some heat embossing, so I put down some anti-static powder, and I have a snowflake and actually a star from the Fa La La stamp set mounted onto 2 acrylic blocks, and I'm going to repeat stamp these to kind of create the look of a snow falling from the sky, or snowflakes falling from the sky. Started with the largest snowflake, just stamped that several times, and then I moved on to the smaller snowflake. I am not worried about the lower third of this panel because that background is going to be basically covered like you saw earlier with the sheep and the trees. So I'm almost done here stamping this, and once I finish stamping all my little snowflakes, I'm going to dip the panel into some white embossing powder, and then I will heat set this with my heat tool. So I am not quite finished with this background panel yet. I do want to add a little bit more dimension. So I have the A2 layers die set here. I grabbed a rectangle die from this set and die cut my panel to create a frame from it. And so I'm now going to add craft foam to this panel. This craft foam obviously is going to pop this panel up and just give it a little bit more dimension. I'm cutting the craft foam down to some really thin strips, and I'm then going to just add these strips to the back side of my frame. I am going to avoid though the very bottom. I'm going to keep that open because I still need to tuck my sheep in and adhere them to that bottom edge. And now I'm just going to go ahead and adhere my sheep to my frame. Just going to grab some liquid glue, add a little bit of glue to the bottom of my sheep. Then I'll flip my frame over and attach that bottom edge right to the back side of the frame. Once I have those attached, I then am going to add my last little strip of craft foam, and then I'll support my sheep with some foam circles or foam dots. Once I've got those stuck down, I'm going to grab my card base here. I have an A2 top folding white card base. I'm going to start by adhering my background panel, and remember this panel is a little bit smaller than an A2 panel because we did cut down and create that frame from it. Just add some liquid glue and center it to the front of my card. Then I'm going to move on to my trees. I'm going to get them into the right position here, and once I have them kind of placed, I then will adhere them down with some more liquid glue. Once I have all those 3 trees stuck down, I then am going to cut a little strip of foam tape or foam adhesive here. I just used a little piece from my foam dots and just added it to the backside of my street light. Now I'm going to stick down my dimensional piece, added some liquid glue to the frame, and then just removed the backing on all the foam dots and stuck down my sheep and frame. And then I'll finish just by removing the backing on that little street lamp, tucking it in behind the sheep, and once I've got that stuck down, this card is complete. So now I will hold this up to the camera so hopefully you can get a good look at all the details in this fun Christmas card. I really love this image of these caroling sheep. They are so cute. Love their little Christmas details like the little hats, scarves, and the Santa suit. Then I just paired it with a really simple kind of outdoor Christmas scene with that ink blended background, some quick and easy ink blended trees, and then of course those embossed snowflakes. I think they add a lot to it. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you'd like any more information on the products I use, please head over to Waffle Flower, and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.